Good afternoon or good morning, ladies and gentlemen, depending on where you are, and welcome to this brief presentation about the Golden Visa program and the changes that have occurred as a result of the end to the high-density residential Golden Visa. The objective of this presentation is to talk a little bit about routes to residency, specifically focused on the Golden Visa and how those have changed, and also to talk about an example of a 280,000 Golden Visa, which is currently the lowest level real estate Golden Visa, and that gives access to residency via the purchase of real estate. I'll start in a way that I normally do not, which is talk a little bit about us. Normally I do this at the end, but I want to focus on the content towards the end of the presentation. So a little bit about us. Our firm was founded in 2014, and very much our focus is on what we call IRM, which is International Retirement Migration. You'll see from the name that the greatest number of our clients are pre-retirees or retirees that are moving essentially from one part of the world to another. And the other, in our case, tends to be Iberia or Southern Europe. And that is where our focus is placed in terms of destination. We're a UK headquartered company, and our destination markets, Portugal and Spain primarily. Although we have ambassadors in a number of countries, these are people who assist us in putting out the message about how Portugal and Spain are desirable destinations for immigration, and who clearly then tell people about what we do. We have multilingual teams located in the regions in the areas where we work, and specifically in Portugal, as is the scope of this presentation. We have people based in the Algarve, Greater Lisbon and Cascais, and in Porto. We get inquiries from around 75 countries, but clients from around 30 or more countries at last count. So the demand for the type of information and services we provide clearly seems to resonate with a whole swathe of different nationalities excuse me, around the world. We have many years of experience with so-called special tax and residency statuses, the non-habitual residency tax status, the D7 and Golden Visa residency programs. We've been working with nationalities for a long time in this space. Importantly for us as a differentiator, one of the many we hope, we are the only company to work strategically with both rentals and sales across the entire country of Portugal. So you may find some real estate agents, for example, who like to sell your property, or some rental agencies who do sort of short-term rentals and then add on a long-term rental. We don't do that. We work strategically in terms of the accommodation or real estate element in both areas. We also try to be as democratic as we can within reason and what the market allows, in helping people with a whole range of budgets, from as low as 500 euros to sometimes more than 4,000 euros plus per month in rental budget, and property sales anything from 75,000, although today that's quite rare other than for pieces of land, especially in the most desirable areas of the country, which tend to be along the coast, up to investments of more than 2 million euros. We pride ourselves on having a huge network of specialist partners. So you may talk to us and find that we're quite knowledgeable about a range of subject matters, but we can't be an expert in everything, and nor do we wish to be. And therefore we work with specialist partners, including lawyers, banks, insurance, car importation, health insurance, excuse me, NHR providers, and so on and so forth. So this is one of the benefits of working with our firm, is that we're almost a go-to, a one-stop shop for a bespoke sort of solution that you may require. And that solution is comprised of specialist input in different subject matters, and that's important for someone who is, for example, dealing with Portugal for the first time or doesn't have any local contacts. On the real estate side, we have a network of probably now it's closer to 150 local real estate agencies and also an in-house search team, because we operate very much as a finder, a property finder. We have the largest regional long-term rental portfolio in the Algarve. It's called algarvelonglets.com. And we also try to keep in touch with what people are thinking and doing, in particular as regards their engagement with Portugal. And we run ongoing one of the largest online expat surveys called the Living in, Moving or Retiring to Portugal survey, which has had thousands of responses over the years. I'm briefly going to touch on why Portugal is the blockbuster option for residency. It really is. I mean, as a Portuguese person, I am often surprised that somehow over the last 10 years, we have managed to position that message so much more strongly, because the country itself has demonstrated many of these facets for many a year. So it's nothing new to Portuguese people, but clearly there has been a greater success in conveying this generally to the potential market in recent times. So the fundamentals of their safety, it hovers between the third and the fourth safest country in the world. Friendly folk, second best at integrating migrants, and by migrants we mean anyone who arrives in the country, you know, from somebody on a residency visa to a refugee. Pretty much this whole range of people who might approach Portugal as their new home are very well looked after and very well received. The ease of travel and connectivity, by the virtue of the fact that it's in Europe, even though it's on the edge of the continent, but it's in Europe, and also it has a fabulous, in particular, road network. So a lot of people are amazed at just how good the roads are, and of course, that's a lot of European EU funding that was channeled into Portugal and was channeled into infrastructure. The country has the 12th best healthcare system in the world, and as an example, in terms of the cost of living comparison, the healthcare could be up to 90% cheaper than someone coming from the US, for example. Exchange rates, few fluctuations. The euro, when I did this presentation, was the first time, which was kind of the end of last year, beginning of this. The rate was similar to 2017. I would say it's actually the euro has weakened slightly as of today, and so people coming with a foreign currency probably have slightly greater buying power today than they did. But currencies are what they are. They will fluctuate all the time, so you need to be protect against that. Popularity and reputation, it isn't any longer the best kept secret, but it is now the best place in the world to retire for 8 years in a row. So it really has transformed itself from sort of a family favorite holiday destination in Southern Europe, one of the top 3, certainly most popular, to standout sort of leader in a retirement and preferred retirement destination, certainly in Europe, and it competes globally with the likes of Panama and so on, and often beats those depending on which ranking you read. Plenty of awards, I won't mention them here, but they apply not only to the country as a whole, but to its regions. So Lisbon wins many awards as a city, weekend destination, cruise destination. The Algarve as a golf course destination, beach destination, so on. Porto as a wine region, river a cruise destination, and the list goes on and on and on. You know, Madeira and the Azores often as island destinations. So small country that packs in a lot of award power, if you will, and the World Travel Awards, which are the sort of the Oscars of the travel industry. Portugal features, if not in first, but in the top 3 positions always in terms of the number of awards that it wins, including being the most popular global travel destination several times that it's won that award. The weather, phenomenal weather, more sunny days in southern Portugal than in southern California. And generally speaking, a very mild climate, not too hot, not too cold, except in the sort of peak summer and winter months. Low cost of living, lowest in Western Europe, although we always raise the fact and the awareness that there are some exceptions. Housing, unfortunately, is now one of those where it is no longer as cheap as it was. Prices have been growing due, obviously, in part to the popularity of the destination. And then the other is fuel, gas, electricity, what you put in your car and what you heat your home with and use to run the electricity in your home. Those are expensive in Portugal. Inflation relating to other costs has remained surprisingly low, although people have seen an increase, but relative to other increases in costs, things such as food, eating out, if you choose the right sort of restaurant in which to eat, some sort of entertainment, telecommunications are still relatively competitive, and then travel within the country can be very cheap, especially if one is a retiree. There are discounts that are available. And then residency programs, one of the reasons it's very popular, the Golden Visa, which I'll talk about in a second, has been one of the biggest, most successful programs. But today, the D7 via proof of income is probably the #1 most popular program for residency. And then the tax program, things like the non-habitual residency, which is between 0 and 10% tax on some foreign income, including pensions. To focus on the Golden Visa changes, the map you see on the left here is the map that defines the density or the regions by density. So you have the gray area along most of the coastline and then along most of the Algarve. That is what we term the high density areas. You then have the blue area, which are the low density areas, and they include the islands as well, not shown on this map. Those would be the low density residential areas. And then the red areas are low density areas within a high density municipality. And Portuguese Golden Visa program offers residence, and citizenship is possible after 5 years of residence in the country. The program itself has received over 6 billion in Golden Visa investment, and so tax revenues for the government have been significant, bearing in mind that there is what we call a municipal transfer tax payable, or a property transfer tax payable, and that is in the region of, on average, around 5 to 6%. So you can do the calculations and figure out how much the Portuguese government is gaining tax as a result of that alone, plus all the VAT on services and other related services linked to the Golden Visa. So significant revenue earner for the Portuguese government over these years. The Chinese are still the largest investors because they climbed into the market very early, primarily in the city of Lisbon, and also caused that inflationary effect of property prices in the capital and in other cities like Porto. And they followed some distance behind by Brazilians, Russians, South Africans. And interestingly, there's been a 10-fold increase from US applicants, albeit from a very, very low base. The reason that the Golden Visa program changed, and it did at the end of last year, beginning of this year, is that there were increasingly complaints about the fact that local residents were starting to be priced out of the market and could no longer afford to purchase properties in their own city. Where many of the sales were happening to foreign residents or investors, and pushing up the prices because all the properties were then being priced to meet that Golden Visa threshold, which is 500,000 in the main areas. And so you found that in cities like Lisbon, every 2-bedroom property, regardless of its state, became 500,000 or as near as, and clearly that had a false inflationary effect. Although one must also say that due to many years of underinvestment, Portuguese real estate was hugely undervalued, in my opinion. So some of that was a compensation to actually truly undervalued inventory in the country. The residential initial program in high density areas ended at the end of last year, as I mentioned, and that means that the gray areas which I've described along the coast mainly no longer qualify for residential properties. And what we mean by that is, if you want to live in the property and they are residential in nature, in other words, they will allow you to live in there, then that no longer, those types of properties no longer qualify. Anything that is commercial or an investment like, so commercial, we mean restaurants, hotels, whatever, those of course still qualify. And also what we call tourism properties, and these are those that are zoned as tourism, as tourist developments, where typically there is a management program in place. Sometimes a guaranteed yield is provided or not, but characterized by the fact that you as an applicant or investor will not be able to spend usually, sometimes there are workarounds, but usually any significant amount of time in that property. It is a pure investment that is intended to make sure that there is more product available for the tourism market. That leads to a whole different conversation about, you know, whether we need all that product for the tourism market, but that's what the law states. That it is product you know, channeled to make sure that there is a broader and greater diversity of tourism offering. And in order to finance that, this has been included as part of the Golden Visa program. So investment funds, which are the other route I won't talk about in detail, but they will increase from 350,000 to 500,000 as a minimum investment, or they have. And low density Golden Visa options remain unchanged at 280,000 and 400,000. And the point I make, and that's whether it's an urban redevelopment or whether it's just any property in a low density area. And I will make a point here about the Algarve, because it's a question we get all the time, and that is, oh, I hear the Algarve have been fully eliminated as part of this change, residential properties. And the answer is no. It's probably the one region where there is so much misinformation about the Golden Visa program. Not only are there coastal regions on the Algarve that are still fully eligible for Golden Visa, but there are also inland areas that are eligible at the 280,000 Golden Visa level. So very low level of investment and still fully eligible for the Golden Visa program. And at the end of this presentation, I'll be talking about one of those such examples. So a quick overview of the Golden Visa and its purchasing costs. Closing costs on purchases. So you have two parts. The one is buying the real estate, and the other is the administrative processing of the application, if I can put it that way. The property or the real estate cost, 5 to 8% is the range of purchase, depending on the purchase price. The transfer tax, which is the biggest bit, is a sliding scale from 0 to 8%. If you buy land, of course, that land itself will have to qualify to the minimum threshold. If you think a Golden Visa, that would be 6%, and then properties above 1 million, 7.5%. Stamp duty, called imposto de selo, is fixed at 0.8%. Legals are typically 1% plus VAT. I'll talk a bit more about that in a second. Incidentals are usually quite low, around 500 euros, and then something that doesn't apply to most people, and that is if you buy land held by companies in administration, so somebody, a developer who's gone bust or something, then you will be exempt of transfer tax because you're saving something that was in administration. But that really applies to people who are doing development projects and the like. Golden Visa application costs and procedures. Government fees around 5,300 per applicant and 2,700 per renewal. And then there's a processing fee of 530 and then 80 euros for family members. Lawyer fees, most lawyers charge between about 3,000 and 10,000 to process a Golden Visa. I will leave it to you to comment on those costs, but this is in addition to the conveyancing cost that they will charge of 1%. Now, you will find lawyers that over the years have learned that it may be a bit more sensible to do a packaged offering, sort of a bundle offering of a cost, usually lower, of course, that bundles both the real estate purchase and the visa application procedures. The process itself would take around 6 months, but the application date locks in the rights under the Golden Visa. And today, or these days, with the CEF, which is the Borders Agency, about to be disbanded and farmed out to 2 other agencies, the timings on the actual biometrics and the dates for biometrics visit are very, very uncertain. Some people are reporting as much as a year that it's taking to do that. So I would say that you lock in the Golden Visa via applying as soon as you have your real estate purchase confirmed, and then you wait, because it really is a wait in terms of getting the biometrics and so on. But the clock starts ticking the minute you actually apply, and not when you get your biometrics. As a contrast, we have the D7 as a residency solution. So it's an income-based residency visa, which can be combined either with a property purchase of no minimum value. So unlike the Golden Visa, where you have to have a minimum threshold depending on the area and the type of property, in the D7, that does not happen. If you decide to buy, as long as you can prove that you have a place to live and it's yours, you have the deed, then how much you spent is irrelevant to the authorities in terms of the context of your D7 application. And a similar thing for the rental. You can rent, and you can rent anywhere for whatever amount of money, as long as you can prove that you have the relevant contract, proving that you have a right and a place to stay, then that forms the basis of your application. Residency, and this applies to Golden Visa or D7, can be combined with tax programs, but they are often confused. First comes residency, and then comes the tax program and access to it, eligibility. So if you are an EU citizen, freedom of movement, or if you are what we call a third country national outside the EU via a visa, you will access the right to reside in Portugal via either freedom of movement or a visa. This comes first. Only once you've got the residency can you then apply for special tax schemes or programs such as the NHR. And the D7 is, importantly, it must be done from the country of origin. There are some challenges involved in this particular process. It requires gathering different information and data. Sometimes not all of it is easy to understand, although, to be fair, we don't believe it's the most difficult of residency programs, certainly on a global scale. And within Europe, it's probably, even though we complain a lot about Portugal being quite bureaucratic, but in comparison to a few other Southern European countries, it's not as bad. So it's somewhere in the middle. COVID-19 travel restrictions, not at the moment as I speak, they're easing, but in 9 months' time, they could be getting worse again. So I think the uncertainty around COVID travel or COVID-affected travel has meant that people have not been able to access the country directly or visit the country as easily as they would have before the pandemic hit. Having to coordinate multiple providers without having sufficient knowledge and information to be able to vet the quality of these various providers. If you're applying from a country to a new country and you don't know that country, it's very difficult to understand who is an expert, who's more of an expert than another person. You can certainly, a lot of social media sort of referrals and recommendations that may or may not work in certain circles, but I think that it's a challenge. And then there is sometimes the false, shall we say, a comfort of expats serving fellow expats and charging premiums for the comfort of dealing with a fellow expat. So, if I'm from South Africa and I have another South African, sitting in Portugal, and I feel comfortable that my fellow South African may know me better than someone else. And equally, if I'm from India, then I have someone who's moved over from India, then a fellow Indian may do this. Americans have increased in numbers. In terms of moving to Portugal, there is a great comfort in speaking to a fellow American, who may have gone through the process and suddenly now become an expert. Beware, whatever the nationality, I've used 3 arbitrary examples, but whatever the nationality, beware of the fact that, simply having some sort of background, similar background with someone doesn't necessarily make that person the best expert on the ground. Look for people who, with a tried and tested record of doing whatever it is you're looking to do, and with commitment and and a business profile, and having done this seriously for a while. It's very important to reduce the risk of any of these types of situations. Then the question of regionality, especially if you do not know exactly where you wish to settle in Portugal. You may not know which service providers actually cover different areas, and if you're looking at Porto, Lisbon, Alentejo, Algarve, well, the likelihood that you find someone that is a true expert in all of those is very low. And so what you want to do is, if you're still at odds as to where you want to go and reside, then please make sure you choose someone that can actually act for you or with you or assist you in multiple regions. This is key. Otherwise, you will be finding you'll have to coordinate and compare different service providers in different regions, which is not always easy. Follow-up may be slow, difficult, and language barriers may exist. Although I would say here, caveat, we often get phone calls on the weekend, and there's sometimes an expectation of people that someone will answer, and they're surprised when sometimes we happen to be working, and frustrated when people don't. Those working people work in the week, and often people don't work on the weekend. So we do have this rather strange situation where somehow people moving countries seem to feel that that the people in the country of arrival are all expected to be working all the time. Don't expect that. I mean, A, it's wrong, and B, it wouldn't happen in our own home countries when we were moving anyway. So try to manage that frustration. If you're busy during the week, don't expect everyone to be, ready to answer the phone calls and answer emails on the weekend because it happens to be when you're less busy. That doesn't excuse the fact that there are many, many companies that simply are slow or will not respond. So you do have to build this into your thought process. And the other thing is that consulates may apply rules in consistency, and assistance varies considerably. So you may find across different countries, you go on social media and ask, oh, what length of contract did you ask for? Oh, some will say you 3 months, 6 months, 12 months. Even within a certain country, there may be a discrepancy. So be careful and make sure you're getting the answers literally from the horse's mouth by speaking to the local consulate and knowing what they wish and what they are thinking of. Some comparison between the D7 and the Golden Visa. So the D7 doesn't depend, the investment level doesn't depend on where in the country you are, or whether the property that you're going to live in, whether rented or purchased, is situated. The Golden Visa is very much a region location-based program. The D7 you can rent or buy. Golden Visa, no rentals, only purchase. The D7, no minimum investments. The Golden Visa, those are stipulated depending on the region. As we've discussed, there have already been changes to the Golden Visa. The other big difference, which we haven't touched on yet, is that the D7 is typically the kind of visa that is for people who intend to live in the country permanently, of a sort of permanent nature, spend significant time in Portugal, and typically make that their primary residence. Whereas the Golden Visa is a residency via investment. You typically would focus on purchasing property that you're not necessarily looking to use yourself. You're just using this as a route to an investment. It's very rare, we find, that someone buys a Golden Visa specific property, thinking of it later, using it as as residence. The better way to come around about it, or come at it, if that is your thinking, is to look for a property that you would want to live in and use, and then pay whatever it is, and then use it to qualify for the Golden Visa program. So think about it the other way around, and hopefully that property, of course, will have to be expensive enough to qualify for the threshold of the area in which it's located. And this poses a challenge now with the elimination of the high density areas from the residency program, because the people who actually want to in the future move to Portugal could well be thinking to themselves, well, the area in which I want to live is in a high density area, so I don't really want to spend a lot of money on a touristic property in which I can't really use and I don't want to use in the future. So maybe the best route would be going for the cheapest possible golden visa route, getting the golden visa, and in 5 years' time, 6 years' time, whenever I'm ready, buying another property for myself that is to live in, and then, you know, trying to do something, if that's possible, with the golden visa property, which is no longer required. So it's going to be important for people now with the limitation in the law, or the change to the law, to figure out the best option, because spending a lot of money for a property that you're not going to use regularly may no longer be the right solution, especially if it's an area which is not the area in which you feel you would like to live in the future. And then there is a risk of overpricing of properties, in particular golden visa properties. I've used the example of Lisbon. Perhaps over the years, that has been less so because the prices have stuck at around, you know, those have ramped up quickly. They maybe have not appreciated as much as the others, although the prices continue to go up in the main centers. So maybe I'm arguing against myself to a certain extent, but there is a risk of overpriced properties of the golden visa in certain areas, certainly, and one needs to be aware of that. I get a lot of people asking us, or we see a lot of people asking us, oh, can I get a golden visa property and get good yields? Often we say, especially at the entry level at 280,000, it's about the golden visa. You know, if you're expecting a golden visa property to also be a world-beating yield generator, you've completely misunderstood the concept. The concept is that there is normally an up pricing or an increase in price in order to get those properties up to the golden visa minimum threshold. Otherwise, probably those sorts of properties would have been cheaper than those levels if they had not been a golden visa property. So, and as all of you who understand yields will understand, the higher the price, the lower the yield. It's just simple as that. So please do not expect a golden visa property, especially at the entry levels, to be phenomenal yield-bearing properties that will generate some income, but they, you know, it's kind of a break-even or slightly better scenario rather than it being, you know, a hugely yield-generating proposition. And then just briefly, for those wishing to contact us, and a little bit about our different services. So since we do so much property finding as a core of the business, feel free to use that email. And then we have the different sites. We have the Retirement Living, or IRM website, which is the algarveseniorliving.com. The Property Finder website, which is propertyfinderportugal.com. As we mentioned, the Long Let's website, which is focused on the Algarve in terms of the portfolio, but we act all over the country, algarvelonglets.com. We're also undertaking our first, very early stages of our first development in the independent senior living space, and that website is luge-living.com. And then for those interested in the D7, we have a site specifically targeted at what we call the big five, the key steps you need to take at a distance in order to apply for a D7, and that's under the Move to Portugal 101.com, and then the access to our survey, which is ongoing. So that's a little bit about us and a little bit about the Golden Visa program, the changes and the key concepts. And hopefully that's been useful for those who just want to get a sense of where the program sits today after the changes that occurred at the beginning of 2022.